Hey, my lovelies, how are we feeling now? Yeah? Still can't? Nothing? I'm gently sure that that might have fixed things. I'm so terribly sorry. So you all just got a solid minute and a half of me talking to myself. How fun. What I was saying is hello, and I'm sorry. Good morning to those of you in a morning time zone. Good afternoon, or hopefully not good the middle of the night for you all. For those of you who are joining us as part of the Web Development Bootcamp, hey again. And for those of you who aren't, hey, look at this question right here. For those of you who are either looking for updates on future boot camps, or for those of you who aren't part of our current boot camp, I would keep an eye on the Class Central blog. So as soon as we're allowed to tell you, we'll tell you. I think the spoiler is that I would expect to see some other things coming out in January. So we will have ongoing learner support for those of you who are finishing up the Web Developer Bootcamp. And we're going to be hopefully able to serve this introductory stuff again. So is there a future JavaScript bootcamp? I'm not allowed to spill it. Uh, but I think that that would kind of count under ongoing support for current learners. Yeah. Don't worry, we've got a plan. Everything's going to be okay. Um, yeah. And when we announce, well, it'll probably be like we're serving one time zone at a time is something we're looking at. So if you see the upcoming plans and you say, no, that's a bad time for me, just wait a couple weeks and I'll swap over. So we'll announce the details hopefully this week, and everything should be fine as things get in 2021. I'm so sorry it's taken so long to get that announced and finalized. So, today we're going to be learning about Flexbox. Oh, and look at me. Have I left all of these jumbled from when we were looking at responsive principles? And Flexbox is really, really cool, and I'm rubbish at it. So, Flexbox is a method of working with CSS where we focus on this concept of everything being rectangles in a really practical way. So I'm going to make tea while I talk to you. I'm shameless. It's very cold out here. Hopefully you all are in warmer regions. So Flexbox really, really leans heavily into this concept of parents and children. And we've talked a little bit about that, haven't we? So that what's the most parental element? That's hard. What is the top level element? The great great grandmother element in HTML? What is the biggest, most fundamental rectangle you can get? And for anybody who's just mumbling to themselves, oh, you know what? I think that might be root. Oh, Matchstore, look at that. We've got absolutely correct answers. Matchstore is giving us both answers. So root is absolutely one way to say it. And those are those HTML elements. And then after that, we'll get stuff like body, and then within body, we'll get main, and then within main, we'll get individual divs or articles. We want more descriptive things than divs. So we've got a lot of options here. Oh, wow. Angel is both from someplace lovely and based someplace. Oh, that's a loud sound in the background. Someplace lovely. I hope Barcelona is significantly less chilly than the United Kingdom this morning. So, yeah, we've got this sort of big box concept. And for Flexbox, we're going to squish boxes and move boxes based on the rules that we give their parents. Yeah. So we're going to come up possibly to root, possibly to the great grandmother of all parent elements, or possibly to smaller, more junior parent elements. And we're going to say, hey, I am the web developer and I'm telling you what to do. And they say, cool. Well, I'm a parent. And now that you've told me what to do, I'm going to tell all of my children what to do. I'm going to apply those rules for you all the way down until we get some other rules. So the first thing we're going to do with Flexbox is let's flex some boxes. So we're going to use alternating challenge styles to show how CSS can move these in two different ways. So placing the CSS property display flex on an element lets me use other flex properties to build a responsive page. Setting this to flex lets me flex. And this is going to feel super weird for a while. I hate to continually say it'll make sense once you're more experienced, but I think most CSS stuff, the more you play with it, the less weird it feels. And Flexbox may indeed be one of those things. I confess it still feels weird to me. So we're going to add the CSS property display to box container, and we're going to set that to flex. And we've got a decent idea of what those words mean so far, I think. We've got box container, and that's our ID. We're seeing that hash, so there's probably just one. And I'm going to say property. Oh, yeah. So I'm going to do this as we go. So this is a really good question. So remember that a property are these keywords, these commands. If CSS is your puppy, properties are commands that CSS just knows out of the box, are already been taught to do these tricks. So display is one of these CSS properties that CSS already knows. And I bet we're going to be playing with this a bit. Yeah. So MDN says the display CSS property sets whether an element is treated as a block or an inline element. Yeah, remember when we learned a little bit about this? So what's the difference between block and inline? I love this. So remember when we learned about the natural flow of a page and how some elements will automatically get put on a different line. Scott Hanselman taught us the concept of a carriage return yesterday. So enter on a typewriter back in the day. And things like multiple paragraphs automatically get put into blocks. They are separate and they get put on separate lines. Inline are I'm so sorry. Inline is when you can have these elements and they don't automatically jump to the next line unless you specify. So really what display is letting us do is mess with this flow that's sort of default. Does that feel okay? Yeah, hopefully that feels okay. We'll look at this a little more and it'll feel a little bit less weird as we go. Let's go ahead and where is my fragile? Look, I coughed and lost my mind. Look at me. Absolutely useless with the tiniest bit of cold. So we're going to set the display property. We're going to set that to flex. Oh, look at that. And this is a really good example of what Matchstore was asking about to say, hey, what's the difference between block and inline? And we had these laid out block style to say, hey, these are separate divs. Am I lying to you? Are these separate divs? So these are separate divs. By default, by the natural flow of the page, they're going to get put on separate lines. They're going to go one and then further down the page, the other would be added. And we say, hey, I want to change the way these are displayed. I want to change the default display and flex these. Yeah. And we'll play with this a little bit longer. Yeah. So the default layout laid them out block style instead of inline style, like treated them as block objects and put them on separate lines. And we're just is a bit bold, isn't it? What we're doing is we're saying, hey, I understand that these are naturally going to be laid out block style, and I want to go ahead and flex these. So if you've got the space, go ahead and squish these together. This will make more and more sense the more we play with it. Oh, heck. It's just going to keep squishing this around, isn't it? It's because I'm rubbish. So let's go ahead and unzip this so we can actually see what the layout should look like. Is that fitting on your screen? Okay. I'm rubbish. Is that a bit easier to see? That feels okay. Hopefully that feels okay. Can we do the same doing float? Tanya's got a really good question saying, oh, hey, well, it looks like what we're doing is that we're messing with the default flow of the page. And Tanya's got a really good point. Like, hey, we can do this in different ways. We could do this without using Flexbox. Could Float do this? And I think it could, yeah. And after Flexbox, we're going to learn another method of changing the flow called grid, which is a bit more modern, a bit more gritty. Tanya, you're just always asking fantastic questions. Anybody who wants to fuss at me at any time, you're never holding me up. So we're going to set your. Here's a tweet on the right with Quincy. Hey, Quincy. Quincy is the person who started Free Code Camp and really gave us this great curriculum to work with. And we've got a tweet embed. And what we're thinking is, well, you know what? We've got the default layout here. But really, we want to mess with this flow because we could make this look much, much neater, couldn't we? So we're going to add the CSS property to all of the items below. The header's profile name, the header's follow bin, the H3, the H4, and footer. So we're just is still very bold, but we're going to say display flex to the header. Okay, and we could see reasonably practically that keeping the header flexed, like saying, hey, if there's enough room after the header, go on and add the next thing. That really works. So how are float and flexbox different? Because they both remove the element from the normal flow. So we've got a bunch of different ways that we could change the normal flow. We could push things back and forth with padding and margins if we wanted. We could float them in different directions. What Flexbox is really doing is it's giving us so the display flex properties are what we're using to move stuff around. But really, I think of Flexbox, and I'm wrong all the time. Please let me know if there are any Flexbox experts who'd love to disagree with me. I'd be excited. I see this as really a philosophical approach to say, hey, we've got these properties, we've got these commands. It's really a method or a philosophy of treating the elements in your site or in your application like they're going to flow a little bit with squishing boxes. And again, that sounds so weird, and that sounds, obviously bad philosophy. So what's different after making the display flex? I was asking, and let's get there. We'll make the displays flex, and then we're going to do some other stuff with Flexbox that'll outline a little bit more of what it does. So the follow, oh gosh, you're asking what's different where we just changed here. Yeah, the follow button move. Let's undo that. So when we undo that, the follow button was under it. The follow button was automatically placed in block layout. And here we say, wait, hey, if you've got room, go ahead and add the next thing. Like, oh yeah, we'll do that. Let's go ahead and look at the profile name. And because not you all are very good, but developers can be lazy sometimes, we're going to copy and paste this. It doesn't look like a lot changed there with the header. Oh, that's because that's not what I'm supposed to be doing. I hear that if you actually do what you're supposed to, you get much better results. We see that when we added flex to the profile name, that went and sat next to, let's go ahead and spread this out just a little bit more so we can see. That went ahead and jumped on the line next to the header. All right. The follow button, let's find that follow button. Header follow button. Let's flex that. And that's already on the same line. This just means if we resized it, it would stay on the same line. The H3 and H4, we want to flex these too. That doesn't seem to have done too much, does it? And then the footer. Where's the footer? There we are. Oh, as soon as we added flex to the footer, it took that share like retweet and put that up. And what do you think when we say footer stats? You think that's going to squish the 107? That's quite a number of retweets. That's very impressive. I think that's going to squish these. Oh. And I think we're seeing this still a little weird because of the way I've got this laid out. But if we had enough space here, we'd see that this is all really nicely formatted now. So even though responsive stuff can still get a little squishy if it gets small enough, what Flexbox is doing is saying, hey, if your user has the space to display these next to each other, go ahead and squish some more on there. If they've got space in their conceptual rectangle that would fit these on their viewport, yeah, let them show it all on the same line because I think that'll look better. Oh, heck. Follow button should have a where follow button. I'm rubbish. Oh, here we are. Is it header follow button? Let's see if that works. We're going to run our tests. Everything's fine. Oh, and you know what? It's just going to keep resizing these in an annoying way every single time. So we've already flexed. We've squished these boxes. But maybe you don't always want to squish things next to each other horizontally. And that's chill. We've got some options here. So we've got flex direction to the parent item, and we could set it to a row, or we could set it to a column. We could set it to the row backwards. Wait, that's forwards. Or we could set it to the column backwards as well. So we've got a lot of different options here. Let's see what this is going to do. The default value for flex direction is row. So if you say, hey, flex this, and if you don't give it any other options, it's going to go ahead and put it in a row. So is this how we do this? I'm genuinely unsure. Hey, wasn't that cool? So here we've said, when you display this, can you flex it? Like, you know what? Platypus has the best point here. This is just fancy tables. I hate to get all back in my day. But a long, long time ago, an impossibly long time ago on the web, we largely did, if you wanted to force something out of the normal flow, without CSS back in those dark days, we'd use tables. Very chill. Oh, it's definitely a peppermint tea kind of morning, isn't it? So what we've set this is to row reverse, and we saw our colors flip. And it wasn't that our colors changed. It's that these two divs, these two items were swapped around because they're being displayed in a different flex direction. Let's try this another way. Let's say column reverse. Oh, if you spell it wrong, just give your default back. Column reverse gives us that red and then our blue. But if we just say column, we get our blue and then reds. Yeah, you can just swap stuff around and introduce some deep, gentle chaos into your life. It's all right. We wanted to stick with row reverse because that's what our homework has been. We're going to run our tests and we're going to keep playing with some Flexbox stuff until it feels a little bit steadier. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and reload this just to see if it stops being. Nope, it's just going to be weird with that layout every single time. Everything's going to be bad forever in a very low-key way. So we're going to add the flex direction property to create rows in this tweet embed. So the header and footer have child elements that could be arranged as rows. And I think the children of the header, let's see if we can work this out. Whoa, we're going to come all the way down. So what's in our header starts here. And our header ends way down here. So all of the elements between those are our child elements. And Tunnel's saying, oh, you know what? Flexbox just doesn't stick in my head. I've got to go web search. That is super, super okay. I'm rubbish at this as well. I mean, I imagine you're significantly better. But having to look stuff up, there's nothing wrong with that. I promise. We've got somebody saying, oh, hello, or bonjour. Will we start the boot camp again November 15th? So we're going to be announcing future plans for the boot camp in the next week or two. If you keep an eye on, let me go ahead and give you the link. The loudest key. That's not even true. So if you keep an eye on classcentral.com, we're going to be announcing really, really soon what we're going to be doing with the next bootcamp. I promise that we're going to be doing something new. And I promise, wow, that's very bold. I was like, I promise you'll be happy with it. Oof, oof. I hope that this is still going to serve learners really well. I'm really excited about it. And little tiny spoiler, there's going to be some folks who aren't just me coming and helping out with it. So you're going to have much better informed teachers. Of course, I'll still be your favorite one, but we'll have some other folks who are actually very, very good at stuff. A girl's asking, "Oh, is it announced next week?" We're getting the drafting together, so it'll be announced within the next week or two. I know that's not terribly satisfying. Sorry, that's what you get with a free boot camp. You get me being increasingly laid back. Oh gosh, you're hoping we do something with JavaScript. Hmm. I would definitely watch that. Watch the blog over at Class Central then. We're likely to go ahead and take a bit of a break boot camp wise and give you all some space through November and December and come back and do some stuff together in January if that feels okay. Mostly because I'm very lazy when it's cold. So the header and footer. So let's go ahead. Can you all yell at me because I'm going to drink some tea? What are the child elements? What are the child elements of this header? What elements live inside? And you can either give me the class names for these, or you can just tell me what kinds of elements. And I'm going to cheat. I'm going to take the easy one from you because I'm mean. Oh, no, Mad Store, you got it from me first. I was like, there's an image. We've got a couple of divs, absolutely. And some of these have classes. We've got profile thumbnail, profile name, follow button. We know our buttons in there. So all of these are going to be affected when we change the rules for the header. So we're going to add the CSS property flex direction to the header and footer. And let's come down and do the same thing for the footer. What lives inside the footer? Whoop, there's a lot in here. So the footer starts here. We've got, a div with the class of stats, a div with a class of retweets, div with a class of likes, div with a class of CTA. And if you've never heard CTA before, it's kind of a businessy term. Oh, Angel points out there's a button up there in the header, and you are gloriously, incomparably right. Linda's like, wait. There's the H3 and H4, and you continue to be robustly right. Tunnel, if you're feeling like you're building with an Etch-a-Sketch, that is the best way I've ever heard that described. And while I hope it doesn't make light of you struggling and learning, I find this absolutely delightful as a description, and I may steal it. What, steal? I may use it as an homage to yourself. So when we set the flex direction of row, which is the default, it shouldn't change too much, we don't think, to the footer, it should change these buttons. It should, yeah. So we're going to come all the way up, and let's go ahead and do that. Whoop, that was it. That wasn't all the way up, wasn't it? So we've got our flex. We've got everything spelled wrong. Wait. If you want to feel good about yourself as a web developer, and if you are doing these courses, you're a web developer. If you want to feel bad about developing, but learn a lot, doing this on streaming or typing where somebody can see you is definitely a way to humble yourself. You want to continually misspell words you know, typing where the internet can see you. We're going to take a deep breath and come on down and come down to the footer. And we're setting our flex direction again. And we're going to set that to row. And treat, I'm going to get a much, much better camera when we come back and do whatever surprise thing we're going to do for the next, if we did a next boot camp. So it should be much easier to see the screen as well. Everything's fine. So what it had us do is said, hey, we're going to add the flex direction of row. And you may have seen that nothing really happened. And that's because the flex direction of row is the default. So chill. We did something. We did it right because running the tests worked. But it just means, well, we've set that to the default. That's all chill. Now we're going to create a column, which we cheated and we did a little early. We messed about with this because when you don't understand something, what do? You can ask somebody. But if it's me, I'm going to make you look it up, which is our next option. Or you can get weird. That kind of experimentation where you're like, oh, I've just learned that column exists. Let's try column. Oh, do you know what Tunnel Rat is? Oh, we've got a couple different questions. Tunnel Rat was saying, oh, and you might want to be careful to say JavaScript instead of Java because Java is a whole different thing and it's a lot. And yeah, importing your JavaScript files and importing your CSS files is something that we don't really learn to do in tutorials, but is so important. Matchstore, can you go ahead and have an idea of what you want to go back to? And we'll go back to it after we finish all of these. We'll take some time if that's okay. And Vishwa is saying, okay, if we've got 10 boxes, is it possible to change the direction of each box? And yeah, but it depends what you want to do. So if you say, oh, I've got 10 boxes, I want 5 columns of 2, you might want to go ahead and create multiple parent containers. Say, okay, I've got 10 boxes. I want 5 columns of 2. In that case, you'd probably want to make box container 1, box container 2, box container 3, box container 5. So you can set the rules and the flex direction for each parent container of your 10 boxes. Yeah, does that make sense? Oh, cool. No, actually, this is a really good question. So, well, you know what? In the previous example, we set let's go back to our previous example. Everything, they're going to make us do it again. Oh, heck. Consistently weird. Oh, yeah. Hang on. That's a really good question, Tanya. I'll get to it in just a second. So before, we did go through and we added flex to all of these individual children elements of the header. So we added it to header profile name. We added it to the follow button. And here, we're changing all of the children elements using just their parent rules. So I think what we did before is get sort of into the habit of practicing that. And it really showed us the dramatic change because things would jump. And now it's saying, well, you know what? Really, you'd probably set it at the parent level. So this is giving us a slightly more realistic view, a little bit of a more practical view of how we might do that. So here we're setting it at the parent, which is absolutely the best question. And that's because this is probably how you're going to do it a lot and say, I want all my children of the header and footer to follow this rule. I'm going to set it at the header and footer level. We already know this works. We're about 25% of the way done as well. What a laid back one. Except for continually having to resize these. How annoying, isn't it? So Tanya's got a good one to say, oh, can we turn an image or a box in this case upside down? And I think we can. I'm not sure we would necessarily do that with. Yeah, let's look at this. And go. Flip an image with CSS. Is there just a flip? Is there just a flip option? Move your mouse. Ooh, so that. And we remember what this is. This is the hover effect, isn't it? So the pseudo class hover. And what has it done? Oh, they've used WebKit. Okay. So there's a way to do this. It's a little futzy. very technical term, futzy. We haven't learned this yet. Is there a way to do this without WebKit? I bet there is. Sorry, we're going on a journey together. Yeah, so flip horizontally. This is the kind of stuff I was thinking. So flip horizontally, transform, scale X. We learned that pretty recently. So, okay, let's go ahead. And Chris Query just writes really fantastic CSS tricks. Rotate TPX has that absolutely perfect. So if we wanted to turn it upside down or to flip it or reverse it, here's a very good blog post on how to do that. There are no silly questions, and this question was decidedly unsilly. Well, what is silly is me having messed up my browser, so I keep having to change it. So we've got our two boxes. We've set them to flex, and now we're going to put them in a column. We did this before when we were just messing about, so we feel reasonably confident about this. We know that we set the flex direction. That's not the flex direction. We're going to set that to column, which is famous. Woof. Immediately we get that jump. Column is one of these words that is incredibly difficult to type if people are watching you. It's just brutal. We're going to run our tests. It's because I went and came back. It's going to lie and say we're not quite 25% of the way done, but I think we are. So we're going to use column in a much more practical way now and say, okay, the tweet embed for header and footer used flex direction with a row value. So that's fine. That's the default. We learned this. So Matt Shore is asking, did we learn wrapper yet? And we haven't learned wrapper yet. Matt Shore, if it's not a bother, can I ask? I'm without my beloved colleague today. If you can you chuck the MDN for wrapper in if you can find it? If it's not, very unkind for me to be giving you chores. Your new teacher's going to be your favorite one, like way less mean than me. So we're going to go ahead and change some of these to columns. So change these from the default. So flex direction for profile name is going to be set to column. Okay. So we're changing one of the children. We're not changing one of the parent elements. If we were going to change the parent elements to column, what would that do? Would this be deeply chaotic? Ooh, it's not so bad, but it does break things out into more of a column than a row. That doesn't look fabulous, does it? There we go. That makes more sense for all of it. We're going to come to profile name, and we're going to change this one. Flex direction. And the flex direction here is, Vishal, you're asking, can we resize with different sizes? We can. There's a couple different ways to do that. You can set image sizes. You can set div size. So there's a bunch of different ways to do that with CSS. Oh, you know what? If you can't find it on MDN, it's probably outside of the scope for me being able to easily explain it. Everything's fine, and everything's going to be fine. You love how I just sent you to be like, no, I'm rubbish at this. Can you? I know, no, it's fine. So we've set this to column. And I'm going to cut this and see what jumps. I'm not seeing anything jump at all with header name. Does it need more space? I think this is one of those that doesn't really... Am I spelling it wrong? Ooh. Thank you very much. How wonderfully embarrassing. At least I said beforehand that column is wonderfully hard to spell when people are watching you. So now we've seen that the profile name is in a column with the username. And I couldn't tell you. I think that might be how it actually runs on Twitter. But if we run our tests, everything continues to be fine. Well, I mean, in the wider world, things are scary and weird and bad sometimes. But right here, right now, this is just CSS. It can't hurt us. So we're going to align elements using the justify content property. So sometimes the flex elements in a flex container don't fill all the space in a container. And you might want to tell CSS, hey, you know what? you've got all this space in this container and you're not using all of it. I want something that tells you how to use this space. It's like you're an interior designer and say, okay, cool. You've got all this space. I want to go ahead and be really specific around how I want you to use this space. So we're going to use justify content. Yeah. And we've got a bunch of different options on this property. Remember, the property are the tricks your CSS puppy knows right out of the box. So here, justify content center. What do we think that might do? You use justify content as a property to say how you want to use the space. What do we think? And just guessing is fine. Nothing bad's going to happen if you guess wrong. What might justify content center do to your element you're applying it to? This is an excuse for me to drink some more tea. I'm going to go way out on a limb and think that maybe if we justify our content to the center, yeah, oh, we've got a guess saying, hey, maybe this is going to space stuff out. Ooh, yeah. I think it might, and I'm not sure myself, I think it might pin the element we're talking about to the center. But I don't know. Let's check. So here we've got this Dodger blue one. Let's set this. I think by default, by changing the I think if we change layout, we're going to change how the boxes are spaced out. Oh, enter, center. Oh, Sunday. Good morning, lovely. Linda thinks, you know what? I think that's going to stick that in the middle. I think if we justify the content in the center. Well, that hasn't done a thing. Maybe I'm doing it wrong. So here, justify center aligns all the flex items to the center inside the flex container. Flex start aligns the items to the start of the flex container. So for a row, that means it's going to push items to the left. And for a column, it pushes items to the top. If there's no default, it's set to flex end, which puts it on the end of your row or the end of your column. Yeah, maybe. Oh, yeah, maybe expanding the viewport. Oh, I did it in box one instead of box container. Oh, you all are so patient. Like I love these streams because I get to get told I'm wrong all the time, but in such gentle and loving ways. You all should follow me to work. I'm wrong all the time. Oh, that's so. We've got a bunch of people who were right. So Madge Stewart said, you know what? I think that's going to change the spacing on your columns. And it absolutely did. Oh, heck, sorry, I've just left you on the screen, Linda. Linda was saying, you know what? I think it's going to center everything and right as well. You were, well, Master is now saying, oh, I was wrong. And I don't think that's true. Because you said it's going to change the spacing. Oh, unless you meant it's going to add spaces, in which case we were both wrong. So you thought there was going to be a space between the boxes. Oh, we can both be wrong together because I thought it would just dead center the one thing. So what did it want us to do? Space align aligns the items to the center of the main axis with an extra space. Do you know what? This thing that you described, there is a way to do that. Whoa, weird. Weird. Oh, because the gray is the space. Yeah. Very, very cool. Tanya makes a really solid point here. You know what? You've got to apply that to the parent element because if you apply it to the children, you're just applying it to the one. And that's not really how Flexbox works. Like if you're changing things relative to their peers and relative to their children, just changing the children isn't going to matter. Not as much. Master is asking, can it both be center and space between? I don't know. Let's very quickly get weird. I don't think so. I think it's going to take, and if it can't do both, which one do you think it'll use? I think it'll use second one. Between. So yeah, it does. Yeah, Mantra is absolutely right, saying, you know what, it's going to use the last one. And it did. It looks like if you go ahead and give it two different things, it says, no, I don't want to do both things. So here we've got all the different ways we can set it. Space around, space evenly. Oh, so if you wanted to do both, how would you achieve it? I'm not sure you could do both. They're somewhat different concepts, aren't they? One of them is center these, and one of them is space them out. If you wanted to, yep, you beat me to say, if you wanted them to be centered but still have some space around those, padding and margins are going to be your friends. Y'all don't need me at all at this stage, and I love it. So we already did the bonus. Try the other options. And we're going to center this because that's what our homework asks us to do. So here the gray is the background of our parent element. And our two elements here, yeah, perfect. Yes, 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 yes. So this is really important. When we're setting the rules for the container, we're changing what the children do. Yeah. So we're doing is saying, hey, mother div, please let your children know. Please let any of the elements, the contents in these containers know that this is what we'd like to see. Angel's like, hey, try space evenly. Let's try space evenly. Oh, it's not bad at all. Okay, so that was such a fantastic point, and I cannot imagine anyone saying that so succinctly and so wonderfully. Okay, center this. We're going to come down and run our tests, and we feel pretty confident that we're just going to keep zipping through this. But I'm going to have to keep resetting this every time because I'm rubbish. So we're going to use justify content. We're going to take this thing we've just learned and we're going to apply it to this tweet because I'm sure spending more time on social media will make us all better developers. It won't just make us scroll to nothingness forever. So for the tweet embed, we're going to add this CSS property justify content to profile name, and we could set the value to any of the options from the last challenge. So you all get to choose what we're going to set this to. The first person who yells a justify content choice that works, we'll do that. Profile name. Oh, they've even given us some space. Isn't that nice? Y'all are going to have to yell at me. What are we going to put here? So far, we've just said justify. Doing it centered, doing it spaced evenly. Look at me. I'm shameless when I've got some tea where I'm like, here's a question to the class, which just so happens corresponds to me getting some tea. So I'm going to go with the last one I see here, which is space evenly. Yeah. I don't know if that'll even do anything. Let's say, hey, and ooh, we're going to space that out evenly. Space between, Tanya suggests. I got you. Let's do space between. Ooh, we get a little bit more space with space between. It's very bold. It's a very strong choice. Fabulous. We can run our tests. Everything's fine. And here, we're just getting a reminder that, hey, if you've got the cash, donating to Free Code Camp is a cool thing to do. So Free Code Camp is not me. Free Code Camp is not the bootcamp. This is a nonprofit who builds this sandbox platform and builds all this curriculum and offers it to folks for free. They say, oh, if you want to, $5 a month. But one thing I'm going to be very, very mean about, because I'm mean to you all consistently, is do not spend any of your money till you've got money to, don't, if it's going to be a hardship, don't donate yet. Donate after you're in a very fancy tech job, making very fancy tech money. Or if that's even your goal. Oh, this is a really good question. So say, hey, why is Class Central chosen Free Code Camp for boot camps? And I confess that that's probably me. So I really, really like Free Code Camp. I really like that they've made this available. And as an educator, I really like the sort of robustness of this, that it's possible to follow along by yourselves. And I just wanted to add a social aspect to see if that made it easier or friendlier to go through them. I confess I'm a big fan of Free Code Camp because it's just really, really high quality. So back when I was managing people, I've hired multiple engineers. Oh gosh, I'm not. I'm separate from Class Central. We're doing this as a project together. And I confess that Dewal Shaw, who is the nicest man in the world, and I believe his title is head boss man of Class Central. He was the one who came. He was like, oh, well, how about we do this together? And as we chatted, almost immediately, like, oh, free code camp, such a good idea. But I've hired a bunch of engineers in the past who've become engineers just using this. And I think it's a just taking these very intensive classes just makes it sound very trivial. So align items is going to feel similar to justify content. We're going to put stuff in a line. So flex containers have a cross axis, and that's going to be different. It's the opposite of the main axis. So for rows, the main axis is horizontal. That's a row. But the cross axis is vertical. And for a column, your main axis is vertical and your cross axis is horizontal. Phew. So align items, aligns them along the cross axis, so the opposite axis. For a row, it means line them up vertically. For a column, it means line them up horizontally. Oof, we've made them very confusing. That's rubbish of me. So instead of me sort of voguing to show you what that might look like, let's go ahead and see what it looks like. So we've got a bunch of different options here, and we're not going to do them all, but we're just going to talk about them really quickly. Oh, we've got some folks saying, oh, who's going to be teaching in January? If there was to be a boot camp in January. And I don't imagine I'll go anywhere, but I think we might have other people come and hang out as well. Yeah. If that's not vague enough and mysterious enough. I'm selfish and I love teaching you all, and I would never, ever, ever. I mean, I suppose illness, old age, or death could keep me from it, but if possible, I will continue to bother you all for as long as I can. So align items, flex start, does what it says it sounds like. Hey, align items to the start of the flex container. For rows, that aligns, and remember, that's going to be along the cross axis. So for rows, instead of horizontally, for flex start, it's going to be vertically. So the top of a column. Weird. Eggro's asking when we're going to go ahead and get those details. We'll get those in the next week or two. I know that's not a very satisfying answer. Yeah. Next week is probably safer, isn't it? Yeah. But I promise it's not going to be something where we announce one week and you have to start next week. We're going to give you tons of time. Flex end, move stuff to the end of the cross. Oh gosh, I forgot that word. Cross axis. Axis, that's it. Center, aligns item to the center of the cross axis. Stretch. Oh gosh. So yeah, the first off, I promise you I will never, ever, ever teach Java. You know what? Out of decency, I don't even think I should teach y'all JavaScript. But yeah, in January, there'll be lots and lots of time. We'll make time and everything will be fine. Well, look at me. I'm saying, oh, in January, everything will be, that's a big promise, isn't it? We've got stretch them out across the cross axis. Baseline. So we're going to put that, align items along the lines that text would sit on if text was there. And that's going to feel weird until we try it. So we're going to come in here and just mess with some stuff until we feel happy. It's a very, very strange approach to mental health. We're just going to do some CSS until we feel at peace. We're going to come to a line. We're going to spell a line wrong. Line items. Oh, let's try a weird one first. Let's try baseline first. Look at that. Why are those different sizes? Why are those different sizes? Ooh. Can anybody guess why these are different sizes? Yeah. Drew's like, you know what? I think these are different sizes because of the text. The text is sitting kind of in the middle of the box, and the text here is two different sizes. So we've got these aligned differently. Oh, I feel bad calling you a dweeb. But dweeb has got this absolutely right. Like, well, we've aligned this depending on where the text baseline sits. The baseline's different in different places. Perfect and beautiful and incomparable and easy. Let's try stretch. Let's stretch some babies out. And please don't stretch any babies. It's a sentence I never thought I would say out loud. Let's go ahead and try center like it wants us to do. Ooh, and we've centered those. And those are different sizes as well. And Tanya's really, really good to point out, like, well, the text size is different, which means these two elements themselves are different sizes. Perfect, perfect observation. So even where we're not aligning it to the baseline, the elements, these rectangles that hold the text, are themselves different sizes. Yeah. So this can be really tricky. We can get different size boxes depending on various elements. Yeah. And the reason that this feels so weird is something that we keep needing to come back to conceptually. So these boxes, these rectangles, are the conceptual rectangles around the text. The reason we're seeing them colored in, and let's take a deep breath and come down, Ooh, is there's a div in them. These divs have different rules. This one has a bigger font size. This one has a smaller. And that means that the rectangles that hold the text, the conceptual rectangles, are different sizes themselves. Platypus had the most chaotic thing I've ever heard of in my life. This would obviously be a terrible thing to do, and how exciting you would have to do it with JavaScript, I think. But like, what a fantastic bad idea! Look at that. That's like an end of the world chaos idea. I confess, I love it. And Tanya, well, what about if we also set flex direction? I like this. Let's set these in two opposing ways. So here we're going to say stretch. And now if we set flex to center, doesn't do anything. Space evenly. That doesn't seem to do much. Or is it space between? Looks like what happens if we move them? Does it depend on where we sit? I'm not seeing flex direction do much of anything for us in this. Let's try baseline here. Flex direction. Magister is here just making it worse. Be like, oh yeah, chaos, make it worse, destroy the world. That's probably not actually what you're suggesting. So let's see. What flex direction do we want to try and set as one more? Because center is still going to leave that centered. Was there start? That wasn't one, was it? Oh, column, yeah. Ooh. So the reason, and this is what I was looking for, the reason both flex direction and align items, does align items still work? Ooh, the reason these can both work at the same time is that they're both on different axes. So the flex direction, we're putting them in the column, and then aligning the items, we're aligning them horizontally. So because they're a column, they're being aligned on their opposite axis. So a column is up and down, the opposite is a horizontal, and they're being aligned horizontally. I wonder if we can pass with this extra one. We can pass with this extra one. Nice. Look how rubbish this is, the consistent resizing. We're going to use align items in this tweet embed. And I like how they've been doing this, where they said, hey, do it with these boxes so you can see. And now do it with this tweet, which you may or may not get to see. Oh, sorry, I'm just leaving you up on the screen forever. I'm so mean. Oh, so for stretch, it is going to stretch out and fill. It can fill the entire HTML element if that is the next parent, or if that's a parent you've specified. So if I've said, if I go ahead and say align items in the root pseudo class, it's going to impact everything else on my website that doesn't have a different rule applied. But otherwise, if I put it here, whoop, it would impact everybody who's in the body. If I put it here, it would change all the children of both the header and the footer. Does that make sense? This is such a good question. I really like this. I really like all the questions. So we're going to go to the follow button and we're going to center it. Where is deep breath in? Hey, here's that follow button. The display is already flexed for us. We're going to align this items, great grammar, we're going to align these to the center. Oh, look at that. It went ahead and said, well, that follow button was really spread out. Let's align this to the center. Let's chill out with this a little bit. And that looked pretty good. What if we run our tests? Everything is fine. Oh, we got like a test pattern look going on. Now. Oh, yeah. So this is something they brought in really, really quietly. But isn't this cool? So we can set rules for multiple classes or multiple selectors or multiple IDs using a comma. So if I wanted to set a rule for my H1s and my H2, not my H23s at the same time, I could say, I could go ahead and this would go ahead and make all my H1s and all my H2s pink. Cool, huh? And we'll delete that because we didn't need it. So we can, and we had this question earlier. What if I have 10 boxes? And I was saying, well, yeah, let's put them in separate containers usually. The flex wrap property will also wrap them. So if you had a bunch of, as we have here, if you had a bunch of boxes and you didn't want to put them in separate containers and you wanted them to go ahead and fill the full line and then wrap around to the second line, we got this. So the first one is default, no wrap. Which is great because Linda was like, now we wrap. I'm like, first option, no wrap. Second option, wrap. Ooh, third option, wrap reverse. So wrap it, but flip it. If it's a row, flip it on its head. If it's a column, flip it in the other direction. So we're going to add flex wrap to the box container, and we're going to give it the value of wrap. We're going to go ahead and give our CSS the permission to head on to another line. Yeah. So what have we got? We've got flex wrap, our semicolon out early. And right now, no wrap is the default. We've by default told it we don't want you to be allowed to wrap. And here, we're giving, ooh, look at that. We're giving them the option. What if we flip all our colors? Yeah, wrap is sort of low-key cool, isn't it? messy fast if you let it. There's a reason that no wrap is the default. We are slowly and meditatively getting through this whole thing. Everything's chill. So we're also going to try flex shrink. And this is going to do exactly what it sounds like, isn't it? So we had some questions earlier. Who was that brilliant, bright young person who was asking, hey, are there different ways to resize this? And there are different ways to resize this. I'm not becoming more effective. I'm consistently friendly and rubbish. I don't even know if I'm consistent. Just consistently rubbish. It's important to have a personal brand. Smilingly rubbish. So we're going to use flex shrink. We're going to shrink an item if its parent is too small. Yeah. What we're going to say is, hey, respect the size that your parent has laid out. Respect the size of your home. So flex shrink takes number as values. The higher the number, the more it will shrink compared to the other items in the container. So if you have one item that, oh heck, if you have one item with a value of 1 and you have one item with a value of 3, your item with a value of 3 is going to be 3 times as big as your number 1 item. Now it's going to drive me crazy. I'm going to have to measure both this mug and this teapot to see if I'm lying to you. So box 1, we're going to give a value of 1, and box 2, we're going to give a value of 2. So we think that box 1 is going to be half the size, or box 2 will be twice as large as box 1. We can do this. And this is important that this is changing this relative to its peers. Flex shrink. 1. Well, it hasn't changed at all. Why hasn't it changed at all? Is it not changed at all because relative to its peers, 1 is 1. Ooh, heck, look at me being so. Okay, Matchstore's got a really good question. Say, wait, what are peers? And you know what? That's really fair. When I say peers, yes, you're absolutely right. You've got it before I could get there. It might be more fair to say siblings. So elements that have the same parent. Yeah. I thought siblings might be a little confusing, but peers is also very confusing. As long as I can make all of you as confused and unhappy as possible. Tanya always causing trouble. It's like, can we do decimals? I don't think we can do decimals, but let's go ahead and see what I think this might break something, but I don't know if it'll just break to a D. This is a good question. Let's do this in a second. Flex shrink. Now we're going to, Tanya is not causing trouble. Well, I mean, only the best kind of trouble. Here, flex shrink 1 hasn't done a heckin' thing. When I change this to 2, I bet it's going to jump because these siblings, these siblings are now different sizes. Oh, y'all, I just explained this backwards. I was saying, something with flex shrink 3 will be 3 times bigger. That's the reverse, isn't it? It's shrink. So something with a flex shrink of 1 is going to stay its normal size, whereas something with a flex shrink of 3 is going to shrink 3 times as small. Ooh, see, this is what gets you when you switch from caffeinated tea. Really, you all would get a much better education if I got an expensive espresso machine. Ooh, I wonder if I can expense it. There we go. Everything's chill. We're going to come on to the next challenge. And this one is where I thought my head was. So the exact same way you can shrink things relative to their siblings or their peers, you can grow things. And flex grow is just saying, hey, my love, I assume that CSS is your love. You can talk to CSS in any tone you want, but you're saying, oh, hello, lovely. I'd really appreciate if you could go ahead and grow relative to your siblings. Let's get you some more space where you can spread out. I think you deserve to be a little bit bigger. Yeah. So we're going to give box 1. So we're going to use the exact same numbers we did last time. So here, let's say flex row. And we're going to set that to 1 again. Ooh, what was that? Ooh. Let's try that again. Flex grow. Yeah. Oh, heck, sorry, I left that up. So shrink means getting smaller. Yeah. So when we're doing the shrink one, we're making it smaller. And grow means we're going to go ahead and make it bigger. Shrink, grow, shrink, grow. Very chill. What we're going to do is now come down and set box 2. What do you think is going to happen? Oh, I didn't check decimal. I'm rubbish. I'm so sorry. I'll check that in just a second. You two are so patient. I'm going to set this to 2. What's going to happen when I set this to 2? Wait, why didn't that do anything? Box 2. Oh. You all can see this before I can, can't you? I set box 2 to the property of box. I'm not super sure that flex grow and box. There we go. That's where my brain is. So we've grown the blue to a value of 1, and we've grown the orange to a value of 2. Twice as big as the balloon. What happens if I say 2.5? Well, it works. It works. Do you know what? So decimal shrink or grow. So would this not mess with the responsiveness? I don't think that. So this is such a good question. I really appreciate this. I don't think it will because as you resize this or as you're on different screens, it's still a relative measurement. So it's still 2.5 times the size of something that is size 1. Whew, that's a lot. So, okay. I was absolutely wrong. Who was right? Who was right? I love Tanya, who was like, I think we can use a decimal value. And I was like, no. It's obviously gonna break it. It's just not gonna work. Tanya, you were right, and I was wrong, and I'm so excited by that. So decimals, completely fine. Also, don't listen to me. We're gonna run our tests. We're just very, very mellowly popping into the home stretch. Oh, what are you all going to do after? I know it's late for some of you, but do you all have any exciting plans for the day? I just asked a bunch of incredibly brilliant people from around the world. Oh, hey, are you all doing anything especially exciting on this Monday? When is the last time you've ever done anything exciting on a Monday? I mean, you probably have very exciting lives, but Monday is a bit, it's not the most exciting day. We're going to use the flex basis property, and that's going to set the initial size of an item before CSS makes adjustments with flex shrink and flex grow. So this is setting sort of an absolute size. So flex shrink, that's relative to its siblings, relative to its peers. Flex grow, relative to its siblings, relative to its peers. Flex basis is saying, hey, you know what? I want to have a measurement here that doesn't depend on my siblings. And we can use absolute measurements here. We can use pixels or ems, or we can use percentage, or we can use the value auto, which will auto size items based on the content. Yeah, chill. This is super chill. This is going to feel weird. We're going to come on down. And we're going to set the initial size of the boxes using flex basis. And I'm going to put that right here. And flex basis, and we're gonna set that for box one. Oh gosh, I'm doing this wrong. I'm setting it for the parent. That doesn't help at all, does it? And the flex basis here is going to be 10M here. There we go. Okay, so this is set to, it's still a relative measurement, but it's a reasonably fixed relative measurement. We know what an M is. It's the line, the same size as a line of regular text. And here we're going to set the flex basis to 20M. So this should be twice as large because we've used these sort of still relative values. Yeah. Oh, cool. So here's a question. Say, oh, well, when should we use relative units and pixels in relation to responsiveness? Which could be better? That's really cool because Tanya makes a good point here that M can really depend, like M can be, it's relative depending on your pixel size or depending on your font size. That's going to change as well. I'm so sorry that I don't have a hard and fast rule for you here. So, yeah, I think that relative values often, um, yeah, or REM, I think relative values often feel a little bit better with responsiveness. But sometimes, like if you've got a logo and your boss says, "Oh, the logo can never shrink beyond a certain size," that's when something like pixels might make an especial lot of sense. So I'm so sorry I don't have a hard and fast rule. It's really about what works best in that situation. That's not very satisfying. Oop, we're going to have to continue to unflex this. So there's a shortcut to set several flex properties at once. So we've got flex grow, flex shrink, and flex basis. We can set them all together using the flex property. So flex 1, 0, 10, we'll set the flex grow to 1, and it's going to be in that order, isn't it? So if I say flex, the first value I give it is going to be the flex grow. The second value I give it is going to be the flex shrink. And the third value I give it is going to be the flex basis. So it's going to grow by the first number, shrink by the second number, and then our absolute values or our relative absolute values next. By default, flex is set to 0, don't grow it at all. 1, leave it the same size as it appears, and set the proper sizing to auto. So we're going to set this for both box 1 and 2. Here we've got flex. We're going to set the flex grow to 2. There's no comma. I want there to be a comma. We're going to set the flex shrink to 2. Well, that's weird. We're going to grow and shrink by the same amount. This sounds strange. And then the flex basis is going to be 150 pixels. I think this is just going to be 150 pixels. Yeah. Okay. What happens if we... Huh. Oh, because we've said it's going to be 150 pixels, it's just going to be 150 pixels. How very strange. Box 2, we're going to say flex to set all these values at the same time. Flex grow is 1. Flex shrink is 1. Ooh, what do we think the sizes of these are going to look like? Oh, these should be the exact same. So they're both 150 pixels. I think tall because we're getting the responsiveness in the flex. So really, how much we grow and shrink them by doesn't seem to matter very much here because they're both 150 pixels in the last setting. How very strange and exciting. Yeah, so first, these values will cause box 1 to grow and fill the extra space at 12. Oh, this is why the numbers are different. So when you resize this, box 1, so the blue box, will move faster, than the orange box. How decidedly weird. How exciting. I can't think of a reason I'd use that, but it's like very, very cool to know. So the order property is going to go ahead and tell CSS, hey, ooh, I think we could say that. So Flexbox is built to be is inbuilt to be more responsive. I think the flexiness of the Flexbox, that's not a very good descriptor. The flexiness of the Flexbox does give it more responsiveness, doesn't it? It's sort of a new paradigm, a new way to mentally parse stuff. And I think that's really exciting. So the order property is going to go ahead and say, hey, here's the order I want you to appear in the Flex container. By default, they'll appear in the same order, but we can change this. And they take numbers at a value, and negative numbers can be used as well. So I'm going to give box 1 a value of 2. Order is 2. Ooh, that immediately swapped it around. And box 2 gets an order of 1. Now, what happens if we mess with these? What is the minus going to do? Nothing. Ooh, making it 11 just makes it even more. What about minus 11? We can play with these as much as we want. We're feeling all right? We are so close to done. If you all have any questions, if you have any questions, you can fuss at me at any time. So, align self. This is going to let you adjust their alignment individually instead of setting it using their rules that their parents get or in relation to their peers. And this can be really useful because some things like float or clear or vertical line aren't going to work on items that are flexed. So this is just giving us a workaround to say, okay, if we're using Flexbox, we can't use float, we can't use flick clear, and we can't use vertical line. We can align self, and it'll accept the same values as line items, and it'll override any values set by the align items property. So this is more powerful than align items. Let's come down and say align self to box 1 and 2. And I'm going to copy that. And we're going to set box 1 to center. So this this on its own is going to be set to center. Look at that. Okay, this is centered. This is not messing about. But this one is going to be set to flex end. What do you think that's going to feel like? It's going all the way to the end of that vertical space for us. Cool. Yeah. So here we've got our dead center, and here we've got very, very much at the end. So I think Flexbox can be used to set the direction. Yeah, Flexbox overrides the natural flow of a page. It's pretty cool. You all always manage to frame things in a bunch of different ways, and it's super useful. So we're going to take a deep breath and come on down. We're going to run our tests. And we're going to submit and go to the next challenge. Let's get a little bit more space in here. Oh no. So we've actually, because we got off topic, we've actually gone through all of the Flexbox ones. This is looking at grid. So this is just going to preview what we're going to be looking at next Monday or Tuesday. If you want to come Tuesday, there's no pressure. So this is giving us an idea of a different kind of paradigm. So when we talked about CSS Flexbox, we're taking the really philosophical approach that HTML is all, it's rectangles all the way down. And we're saying, hey, we want to use these flex properties and some additional properties that are related to it. And we want to squish parents. Of course, people who are much more knowledgeable than I am might disagree on this philosophical take, but I think Flexbox is all about squishing. Yeah, lots of squishing. CSS Grid is going to be really different. CSS Grid always feels much more planned and much more methodical to me. This is where we're taking our user's conceptual viewport, so everything they can see on the screen, and we're going to go ahead and, do you know what? I've got a CSS Grid button. It's not CSS. But we're really saying, hey, I'm going to plan this in grids. And we've got colors saying grids, I love grids. Fantastic. You are officially my my teaching assistant. That you're not. There's no obligation. I'm being mean. I always find CSS Grid a little bit intimidating because you have to have a really good plan. And I never have a good plan. But it's really one of the ways I see people getting really, really good, really beautiful design. You don't have to use CSS Grid, but it helps. So let's take a look at this. Let's look at the difference between display block and inline and when we should use them again. Let's go ahead. When we don't know what's going on, what do? We ask me, and I never know. Or I want to model good lookups, I'm pretty sure. So let's, oh gosh, you've just asked me this question and it's still on the screen. I'm being a dip. So display block. And we want to look this up on MDN. We think MDN is going to have our back here. Display. Fabulous. Let me go ahead and check this deal. Let's look at our options here. Come on, show me the values. There we go. Block. So the element generates a block element box, generating line breaks both before and after the element when in the normal flow. Normal flow. It's normal flow, not natural flow. So think of block elements or elements you've set as blocks. Some of them are by default. So images are not. Divs are paragraphs. So if you have multiple paragraphs, they're automatically block in a natural flow. And that just means that there's going to be a line break. So if I put a P element, there'll be a line break. It'll be below naturally. And you can set this yourself and say, oh, we know I've got a bunch of elements that are next to each other on a line. I want them to be vertically spaced. I'm going to change that to block. Whereas inline, this element means you can have more than one of them in a row. So here, using a very weird example, if we're looking at my bookshelf, each of the containers, if we conceptualize each of these bookshelf cubbies as a div, each of these divs, that's a bad example because they're next to each other as well. If we pretend only these two cubbies exist, there we are, then they would be block. Whereas the books on the shelf are in line. There can be a lot of different books just right next to each other by default. I hope that's useful. Yeah. Are there any other self properties other than align self? Eggroll, you know what I mean? So self, we want. Got align self. What else have we got in CSS? Justify. Oh, I like justify self. That sounds very aggressive. Justify yourself element. What else? Place self exists as well. Okay, that's API. We can ignore the APIs. So yeah, it looks like we've got a couple of different selves in CSS. That was a really fantastic question. Yeah, Magstore frames this really much better than I do. Block means everything's on a separate row. And that's a much better way to explain this than I did. Justify your existence now. Whew, whew. Yeah, so when we're talking about the difference between block and inline, really the big difference is where it's going to sit in the normal flow of the page. That's just kind of, that's the differentiation. Oof, I can never say that properly. Let's talk homework. For your homework, I'd really love if you can try and get through all of the CSS Grid. If you haven't already finished your first project, and let's take a look at those projects. If you haven't already finished your first project, which was the tribute page, I think it's probably a pretty good idea to go ahead and get that done. I'm going to take a deep breath and come all the way down. What collapse? So CSS Grid, it's just 20 lessons. It's a lot, but it's not the worst. If you haven't already done your tribute page, please go ahead and get that finished if you can. But we'll also go ahead and try and see if we can get started on that survey form as well. Yeah? Feels okay? You don't have to have all of these finished by class 12, but after the class is over, it'll be a little bit harder to get support, but we'll still be hanging out in the forums. But if you do these, we can ask questions on extra sessions. Oops. Does anybody else have any oh gosh, while I'm seeing if any of you have any other extra questions. Oh, sorry if I push my watch, apparently. An authoritative British male voice tells me the time. Good to know. Please let me know if you have any other questions. Also, I was going to say, if anyone, your other homework, you all know. Yeah. I bet you were so unpopular in class when you were like, oh yeah, don't we have homework? You're a dear. I adore it. So our homework, please finish all of the CSS grid lessons if you can, so that we can review them next week. And try and finish up the tribute page. If you've already finished it, please go ahead and start on the survey form, so the next project. As always, your homework, your bonus homework for the rest of today, because Mondays are very hard, is to have the easiest possible day that you can. Yeah? Cool. Does anybody else have any other questions? Oh, I'm seeing a single letter question. Oh. Oh gosh, it looks like I may have fallen down on Twitch. Everything is terrible, but also fun. I'll let all of you go. Please have the easiest possible afternoon, and I will lovingly fuss at the Twitch folks about their homework separately.